Okay, let's get started. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today we'll be discussing how Kazoo combined the power of Bombora's Company Surge intent data with 6sense's account engagement platform to identify more in-market accounts and to drive lift in the buying stage model that resulted in sales pipeline. So let's introduce the speakers today. My name is Millie Resnick. I am the VP of Product Marketing at Bombora. Bombora is the leading provider of B2B intent data. And I'm joined today by Casey Carey. He is the CMO at Kazoo. Casey, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Kazoo.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. Kazoo is an HR tech platform. We bring together everything you need to create a highly connected, highly productive culture. We combine goals and OKRs, peer-to-peer recognition, conversations, and incentives into a single, easy-to-use platform that allows employees to be their best.
Great, thank you, Casey. Excited to have you here today.
Okay, really excited to share this story with everyone and a few lessons that we learned along the way. I think the theme of this story really is thinking about this idea of to go big, you have to get small. And it's really about using intent data and marketing technology to really drive highly targeted integrated campaigns. We've got some big competitors in our market. We're not going to outspend all of them. So we decided we just needed to be better marketers. So I'll take you a little bit along that journey and some of the work we've done to get there. First of all, there's kind of the challenge in front of us. So I'm 2 years in my role at Kazoo as CMO. And in the second quarter of 2019, when I started, this was the plan that was put in front of me. The good news is you've got about 4 quarters to get your stuff together because after that, we have really big expectations and you need to drive the business. So that's why I signed up. That's why I was there and really excited about taking on that challenge. However, about 90 days into it, I realized that was going to be a challenge. And not to take anything away from the work that was done prior to my getting there, what I realized though was it wasn't going to get us to where we needed to be. And it was, I would classify it as a tonnage lead gen model, lots of form gates, lots of email addresses, lots of nurture emails, lots of outbound calls trying to get meetings. And that's great. A lot of people get that model to work really well. For us, when I really looked at our target market and kind of the performance and what the opportunity looked like, just didn't see us getting to that growth that we needed to over a long period of time. And we had some other headwinds, frankly. We just launched a new brand, which brought 2 companies together. So we had a new brand that no one knew. We had 2 products that were being brought together initially with duct tape, but much better now. And part of we had launched a new website and kind of the historical stuff, like even our search strategy. I think our domain authority was 20 or 22 or something like that. So we just had a lot of work to do across the board from a marketing perspective to get to where we wanted to be. So we kicked off this initiative that we called Get Shift Done, with the F being somewhat subdued, and made t-shirts and made stickers. And this was our motto for about 15 months from the marketing team. So we really focused on 5 things. One is go from 2 product brands to a single platform brand. Initially, when I really looked at the data, we were selling low. Like we would get a lot of HR managers or HR specialists and they all love to talk, but none of them actually had any budget authority or could actually make an initiative have. So we wanted to make a shift to selling much higher, selling much more strategically, and really moving from being a nice to have to being a must have, to being a core component of a well thought out people strategy, rather than this nice thing that HR has. We wanted to move away from that tonnage model of like throwing lines out there and hoping a fish swims by to being really intentional about identifying in-market target accounts and how do we get our content and create engagement and create interest and ultimately buying within those accounts. And then really shifting our campaign strategy from it was really about capturing hand raisers. Our site had very little information on it. All the content, all the call to actions were get a demo or fill out a form. There just was not a lot of engagement. I think it was hard for people to even know what we did. And if you think about kind of the Gartner stats that everybody kind of throws around, that buyers do 65 to 85% of their homework before they talk to sales. We weren't helping them do that whatsoever. So we wanted to be part of that journey, being helpful along that journey and create a preferred position when they decided that they wanted to talk to sales rather than just trying to harvest people who were interested in sales. So really moving to more of a model of creating hand raisers versus just trying to capture them. So that's what we set out to do. I really want to focus on the last two as part of this conversation. So when I landed, we'd initially created what we call CAPdb, Customer and Prospect Database. And our head of RevOps had built the model, scored our accounts in our CRM system. And you can kind of see the model as it laid out here. It was scored, everything was scored A, B, C, and mostly broke by industry and employee size. And it was great to have that in place because it allowed us to focus, start focusing some of our efforts more on A and B accounts. But after a quarter or two looking, what I realized was that the propensity to win a deal was actually the same across all three segments. The model actually was not very predictive in terms of what we were seeing in actual results coming out the other side. So we had that, but we knew probably wasn't what we ultimately needed or wanted. So we set out on a journey to kind of create the next version. And this is literally the whiteboard, picture of the whiteboard when we were brainstorming this. I had come from Marketo, so I was very familiar with Bombora and intent data. Actually helped launch the Bombora integration with Marketo, and we used it pretty heavily at Marketo as well. And really liked the idea of understanding what the baseline level of interest is, and then being able to detect surge interest above that at the account level. That's very powerful. And if you just think about, as a marketer, if you're looking at your website activity, your email clicks, other engagement points with your brand, it's a fraction of what your available market is doing out there in the market. So being able to open the aperture and unlock the insights around those activities that are happening and being able to tap into them is super powerful and really for personally kind of revolutionizing how we think about B2B marketing in particular. So we decided we're going to have to get a better ICP model in place, ideal customer profile model. But we also then said, okay, let's start using Bombora data and let's combine that with our website behavior data. And let's hack together some sort of rules-based model to predict where people are at in the buying stage. And so initial test was we brought Bombora in and we tested it with our outbound SDRs. And just to prove that A, we could bring it in and use it, and B, we liked what we saw in terms of results. I think we saw almost a 3x improvement in reply rates and contact rates for our outbound SDR team. So again, it's like we were targeting the A accounts from CAPdb. And so felt good about that. So then we said, okay, like how can we start actually leveraging this data more across our campaigns? And we'd tested it in some LinkedIn paid social and some other stuff. But what we realized was just being a small team with small resources to really put the data to use, it was going to be hard for us to get there. To create the models and create all the data infrastructure and everything. We had a great vision. I think we were challenged to execute that vision, at least at the time of this whiteboard picture. So we started looking around at other ways to do this and came across 6sense, which I was somewhat familiar with, and realized that they had a lot of what we were actually trying to build, like on the shelf and ready to go. So we engaged 6sense a little bit over a year and a half ago and implemented, I think we were up and running in February of 2020. So we got a new ICP model in 6sense. So basically a lookalike model, took our customer accounts, modeled those against the universe, scored that universe. And you can kind of see some of the stats here from that model. So 41% of our won opportunities are strong fit. It only represents about 20% of the population. So really nice lift in this model for strong accounts. Moderate tend to be kind of in the middle, and then obviously weak is much lower performance. So this became the foundation of our fit part of our equation. And the other great part of it was, they use a lot more data when they do this model. So they bring all the account firmographic data and everything into it. So it's a little richer model, more predictive, but it also gave us great insights into those accounts and those profiles, right? So what's the revenue distribution? How many employees do they have? We'd been debating forever about what was our core industries, and the model actually helped us understand that. So business services, software and tech, financial services, pharmaceuticals, et cetera. So we could kind of put those arguments to bed and just say, like, let's just use the data to tell us where we win most often and focus our efforts there. So feel great about the fit model that we got in place with 6sense. The other thing that 6sense brought to the table was actually munging all the data together, the behavior data, and modeling it and predicting buying stage, which we were trying to kind of hack together on our own. So bringing in your first party website data, data out of your marketing automation platform, out of your CRM platform, and then also bringing in third-party intent data. So 6sense has an intent data network that they have brought together into their platform. And then they also apply a kind of company and contact graph as part of that, very important part of it. So by bringing all that data together, putting it into a dynamic buying stage model, for any given account, we can get a score as to where we believe they are in their buying stage, and even scores at the contacts within that account, and kind of their contribution to the aggregate score in terms of buying stage. So 6sense was a great off-the-shelf way to kind of ultimately get to where we wanted to be in terms of what our strategy was. So I was very excited to get that put in place. But I was sitting there thinking our Bombora contract was coming up, and we were still using it kind of on an ad hoc basis within our outbound SDR team, but had really shifted to 6sense as being kind of the basis for our intent data and predicting buying stages. So really asked the question, should we keep Bombora, or are we fine with 6sense? So fortunately, the 6sense team was very helpful in putting together a test. So what we looked at was, we initially did this in March of 2020, which at the end of March, we realized that data was crap because so much had changed. And even April, to some degree, was a brand new world, and not really indicative, I think, of a steady state. So we looked at the May data. We kind of held off and waited till we had a full month of May data to look at. But we ran a back test. So we have all the intent data from 6sense. We have all the intent data from Bombora. We know what the results were because we've got all the opportunities that we created in one. So we can create two different models using the data and look at them and say which one's better at predicting the results that actually occurred. So we ran that test, and really my goals were: A, is there sufficient incrementality to justify the cost? But B, and I'll probably almost as equal, or maybe not, maybe even more important, was, can I actually integrate this data in a way that doesn't create a lot of complexity? I could go out and there's dozens of intent data sources out there, and there's a new one every day. But you got to really, for me personally, really ask the question, am I hitting diminishing returns? And every day, like, are we making our lives more complex, or are we making things simpler and creating a bigger return by doing that? So it was really important that we could integrate this into our overall strategy. At the end of the day, the results from the back test came in, and actually I may have switched these stats. I'm gonna have to go look and see now that I look at it. So I believe I did. So let me correct this. So the combined model found 25% more in market businesses, which was really eye-opening, right? So if you think about the buying stages in market being there in a purchase or decision stage, having more accounts that are in those stages really tells you that the Bombora data is bringing new data to the table. Like there's they're seeing intent and search signals on accounts that 6sense isn't seeing. So that was a big part of it. But then also lifted the buying stage model, particularly in the in-market purchase and decision stages. So the model performed better overall, and we had more accounts that we had surge data on. So those were both big wins for us. So with that, we decided we're going to keep the Bombora data and actually worked with 6sense to include that data into our model, which helps get rid of some of the complexity. And I believe that partnership's now been fully announced and is available to everyone, which is awesome to make that data available. So really excited about what we saw there. And so here's kind of the results of that model. So this is our strong ICP. It represents a little over 14,000 accounts. And you can kind of see how they break out by buying stage. Obviously, it's a dynamic model. These actually change every day, the numbers do. But 77% of new opportunities that we create are in decision and purchase. So we feel really good about the predictability of the model in being able to help us target. I would say in general, one of the things I've spent a lot of time and effort on is actually educating the rest of the company on predictive modeling. Everyone finds exceptions. I'll have an SDR look at an account and say, hey, they just came in on a demo request and moved to an SQL, but they don't have any intent data. Or vice versa, this account has tremendous intent data. It looks like they're in market, but I've talked to them and they're not actually buying anything, right? So you can always find exceptions to the model. I always try and tell people it's not perfect, but it's very directional and very predictive. So it's better than any alternative. So we've kind of just done a good job of selling that in and getting to the point now where actually the go-to-market teams talk about in-market accounts or strong fit accounts and just creating that lexicon as part of how we talk about our go-to-market strategies. It's not just a marketing thing, it's a go-to-market thing. And really even our CS teams looking at current customers who are in market and represent a cross-sell opportunity or may actually represent a churn risk. And so opening up other use cases outside of marketing to use this data as well. So at the end of the day, when we brought the fit and buying stage stuff together, here's what we got. We got what we call our 9-box prospect model. We really focus on awareness, consideration, decision, and purchase. And then we'll mostly target strong and moderate. And sometimes, depending on the segments or the campaigns we're running, we'll actually dip down into weak as well. We still get a lot of weak deals that we close. It's fairly large volume in terms of our total universe, but it performs at like a tenth or a quarter of the strong segment in terms of op creation and win rates. So we want to put all of our dollars and most of our effort around strong and moderate. And then we'll target specific segments on top of this. So this becomes our foundational segmentation that we build all our campaigns on top of. We also overlaid G2 data. It's highly predictive. It's just not a lot of it. So we kind of bring that in separately as part of our overall strategy. Here's kind of how our 6sense terms lay out. And you can see we've kind of bucketed them into consideration, decision, and purchase. We've also got on the 6sense side, hundreds of terms for are you a performance management prospect? Are you rewards and recognition prospect? Are you in market for performance management or are you in market for rewards and recognition? And the reason we do that is we have a single model, but we sell 2 solutions. So what we do is we get our core segment. We know you're in market. We know you're a strong fit, but then we can overlay the Bombora and the 6sense terms on top of it to understand which use case are you predominantly interested in? What's your solution of interest? Sometimes what competitors are you looking at? Help us refine that as well. So we bring that context on top of the segmentation to personalize and make our outreach much more relevant and much more targeted for the audience. Here's a little example of the data in action. So this is within the 6sense UI. So on the left this is the Delta Community Credit Union. That's an account. Is the timeline. So you can see I pulled out 5 days here. And within that, you can see our ads, the impressions that we're running against this account, as well as picking up the Bombora Surge topics, particularly for employee recognition and performance management. But then you can also see the 6sense keywords around employee recognition platform. It's always interesting to go look at these timelines in terms of seeing the activity before they hit your website, and then seeing the activity on your website, and hopefully ultimately the op creation. It really helps you understand what some of these buyer journeys look like and how this data is actually applied and being used to understand and detect those and create triggers for campaigns and outreach. On the right, you can see this is a strong fit, high reach, and they're in purchase stage. And the line chart with the little bubbles basically show the purchase stage trend. So they almost got to 100 in early March, but they've been, kind of above 75, which is in market for at least since mid-February. And then you can see down below, so this is actually the iframe, the 6sense iframe that we have within Salesforce. And our SDRs use this so they know what's the ICP, what stage is it in, what are the intent scores, and which topics are they actually surging on. So if we turn this over to an outbound SDR, they've got content that they can map to the topics in terms of setting up and adding to their cadences. So our goal really is to use this data everywhere we can. So we push the 6sense segmentation and the terms into, obviously we use it in display. It's App Nexus, white labeled by 6sense. We push it into LinkedIn and match audiences. We pushed it into Google Analytics for analysis, as well as picking it up into Google Ads for retargeting. We push it into Marketo, which informs our email campaigns, and we push it into SalesLoft for our SDR outbound sequences. So that's most of the places we use it right now. One of the areas we're working on enabling is actually now using this data in Drift to actually create much better chat experiences depending on who you are and where you're at in your buying stage and which industry you're in. So that's kind of next up for us in terms of leveraging this data. Talked a lot about this, but we really think about our campaigns in 3 buckets. One is an awareness campaign, and really focused on reach and impressions for that. And we will look at brand click traffic. At some point, we'll do a brand survey, but we still invest in brand as much as we can over time. Ultimately, strength of brand will determine the success of your demand programs. So it's important to invest in that. Really focused a lot of our mid-funnel campaigns right now on engagement. And we always find ourselves kind of going back to the old trap of, hey, we promoted this really great new hero piece of content and we didn't get any MQLs from it. And I always have to remind the team, the goal is not MQLs, the goal is engagement. How many people engaged the piece? How many in our target market based on fit? What other pieces are they reading? What are we doing to continue the engagement with them? So really reorienting from creating leads that kind of flood the lead object to creating engagements, whether that's content engagements, video views, opening and reading emails, clicking on emails, et cetera. So really just looking at engagement as a primary metric for most of our campaigns. And then we'll have bottom of the funnel campaigns, which is really focused on, hey, you're in market, we've got a buying guide for you, we've got a competitive comparison, we've got case studies, we've got tools to help you kind of make these decisions and talk to the right vendors. So those are really about creating those hand raisers, engaging people once they're in the pipeline to help accelerate that pipeline as well. So really just kind of 3 tranches of campaigns that we're running all the time, with the 6sense segmentation as kind of the foundational piece. And then finally, a little bit of a case study here. So this is a credit union campaign that we're running. I call it a microsegment. So what we're targeting in the total audience, we have 634 credit unions. We were focused for this particular case on in-market, which is 78 credit unions that we're focused on. We're promoting content to them, kind of a we understand your problems piece, a case study piece, and then a solutions content. And kind of looking back over the last 90 days, we reached 74 of the 78 accounts. Really high average impressions, good reach, good frequency, and that's at the account level. So we're probably on average looking at 3 or 4 target personas within each of those accounts that we're going after. Spent about $1,650 in that 90-day period. We have 28 of them come to the solution page, about 40%. And we've opened up almost 140K in open ops in that 90 days against this micro segment. So it's really our strategy is to continue to build out just these micro segment campaigns. A lot of them are evergreen. We'll go back and do some optimization on them. We'll change out the creative. We may change out some of the content, but just continue to build those. And really, at the end of the day, it's just almost like a layer cake of demand. And each time we create one of these, we create more incremental demand. We just keep adding on top of it, period over period. And it becomes a little bit of a self-fulfilling cycle, particularly in our market. The more customers we have, the more case studies, the more wins we have, the better our brand, the more the demand. And it just kind of keeps building on top of itself. So that's where we're at. So a little bit of kind of closing it out, updating on the Get Shift Done results. So we increased our domain authority 32 points in 18 months, which resulted in organic traffic is up 307% over that period. We also increased our brand search 454%. So really great results around our content strategy and the work we've done there. We did a lot of work, particularly now that we're targeting much better. We're not targeting accounts, we're targeting in-market accounts. So the quality of our MQLs is significantly better. We went through from 80+% of MQLs ultimately kind of being disqualified to now we're down to 23% of MQLs get disqualified. And now we're actually driving more MQLs. So driving more MQLs, significantly higher quality, which is really interesting. We actually, from an SDR pre-qual kind of meeting demo time, probably have a third of the resources now working on MQLs than we had 2 years ago. And we have more MQLs, and it's just the quality's there, which is great. And then overall, we've increased our deal win rate. So MQL to win, we've increased that 14 percentage points, which is game changing, frankly. So more in the top and more coming out the bottom. So really feel good about the work we've done and what the team's accomplished. 6sense obviously is core to our strategy as part of we've done this, but Bombora is a key component of contributing to that overall strategy as well.
Thank you so much, Casey. I love that Get Shift Done. We have several questions in the chat, so let's go through those. How did you decide which topics were best for which 6sense predictive buying stage?
It's a really good question. It's a little bit of art and a little bit of science, frankly. We've done a pretty decent job of looking at our organic search strategy and our content strategy, the traffic and engagement on our website, and then also tying that into the topics that we're using within 6sense and Bombora. I wouldn't say they're completely aligned between all those, but we definitely, for our core topics, they are aligned. But we've definitely looked at that entire thing and said, these are the things that our market is searching for, the topics they're interested in, and let's make sure we've got kind of good coverage across that. And I'll give you a really kind of real-time example. So we created a couple new great pieces, but we also had some really good content around diversity, equity, and inclusion. That traffic last quarter was up 70-80%, significant. Like it is now like 25% of our organic traffic or something. Those topics are. So we said, okay, let's go look in Bombora and let's go look in 6sense. Let's start looking at adding those topics to our overall model and our approach. And now let's go spin off campaigns that are specifically focused in those areas. So they kind of feed each other. We'll pick stuff up and, as we're looking at accounts and timelines and signals in Bombora and 6sense, that feeds our content organic strategy. Or if we see stuff on the other side, that'll feed our campaign and segmentation strategy.
Right. Okay, another question. How did you determine who the right contact is to send an email?
Really good question. So we've done quite a bit of persona work. Personas are hard, frankly, just because levels and titles and all those things vary drastically. We serve kind of 100 employees up to 5,000, and the HR department in a 5,000 person company looks radically different than the HR department in a 100-person company. So, we've really looked at kind of what's your role. Sometimes title can indicate that, but we really looked at role and really just focus our campaigns on kind of core roles, which and more in the, I would say, buyer part of it. So typically a director, VP of HR, CHRO, CPO. And what we'll do is we have content that's kind of executive content and more what we not necessarily practitioner, but kind of the who would own the solution. So they may set in comp and bins, they may set in talent management, they may be a generalist, but really like kind of having like, hey, here's how this looks for you as an admin and somebody who owns the program. And this is kind of the business case and the impact on your strategy from an executive perspective.
Right. So this one came in. When you mentioned pushing data to enrich GA, what method did you use? For example, object from 6sense to GTM to custom dimension?
Yeah, custom dimensions. Yeah, absolutely. And once it's custom dimensions, you can then pick that up into Google Ads as well.
Right. Okay. What is your sales and marketing tech stack from tofu through sales enablement?
Great question. I'll start on the sales side. That's the easier one. Obviously, Salesforce, SalesLoft. We use a calling platform called Orem, which is integrated into our SalesLoft cadences. So that's most of that. I think they use Clarity for pipeline, but that's most of the kind of the sales ops side. On the marketing side, 6sense, Marketo, everything's in WordPress. Using obviously the Bombora data, use a lot of Zoom info data for kind of account level firmographics and stuff, and some contact acquisition. Mm-hmm. Those are the big pieces, right? Like we have Drift for chat. We use Google Data Studio for most of our reporting or Google Analytics. And then, we've got dozens of other tools like Moz and some other things that we use. We use Hootsuite for social. Our paid social campaigns are, direct within the platforms, direct within LinkedIn or direct within Instagram.
Right. So we have lots of questions. We'll go through just a couple more. If we don't get to your question, we will follow back up with you after the webinar. So if you're on one platform, 6sense, with both Bombora and 6sense on the same platform, how do you know which leads were discovered by 6sense versus Bombora?
I don't know, and I actually don't care, honestly. So that's where the magic of the model comes in. The model decides which data is the most important. So I'm not necessarily I've done the homework to say like, yes, I know together they're better and that the return is there. So I'm not going to spend any more time trying to prove that over time. I'm actually going to spend time on how do I actually better use the data to drive more results out the other side.
Great response. And then last question for today. Did you use Bombora data combined with 6sense intent data to build your segments in 6sense, or did you keep the segments separate?
So the segments are built on the predictive buying stage model, which uses both 6sense and Bombora intent data. So once that segment's created, so for example, strong fit, purchase or decision stage, we will then overlay on top of that a further selection based on the search terms, which gets us to use cases, solutions of interest, things like that, right? So it gets used in both places. It gets used to determine which buying stage you're in, but then it's also used to determine kind of what are you interested in within that buying stage.
Right. Okay, great. Well, powerful combination. Thank you so much, Casey, for your insight today. It was super valuable for all of our attendees. And again, for folks that had questions that we didn't get to, we will follow up with you after the webinar and make sure to answer all those questions. Thanks again for attending, and have a great day.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.